primary control of critical vehicle functions. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Alrighty. Here we go. Apologies for the little bit of a delay. Let's see. Is this the one I want? So, hey everybody. Welcome, welcome. I am still getting a few things up, but I just wanted to kind of pop in like this while I get everything up and ready. Do apologize. Like I said, getting things pulled up. Let's see, where did I put it? Where did I put it? Where did I put it? Here's one of them. Alright. Alright, hello everybody. My name is Ian, Part-Time Experience. Most just call me Part-Time or just call me Ian. Either is good. So you should be able to hear and see me. I hope volumes are coming clearly. Let me know if I need to adjust them a little bit. Just going to do a quick test on something. So, boop, 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 boop. Alrighty. That seems to work. Yeah. Alright, I'm definitely going to have to find a means of doing that without going crazy. Maybe if I put this here, this over here, this should work better. Sorry. Oh, hold on. There. Yeah, there we go. Sorry about that. No, I was checking my hotkeys, and the flip-flops was not intentional towards you, in particular, Rem, or anyone. Like I said, I'm testing out the things, and if I don't have it on the right screen, there's a light delay, and also it will like make me tab through the different tabs. So, but welcome, Rem. Welcome. Anyone else who happens to pop in. So let's talk about game development. So this is pretty much what I wanted to talk about for a lot of things. There is a lot. I'm still actually trying to manage my screen because there's stuff I gotta like flip through while also keeping an eye on everything else. So as far as what this stream is primarily about, it's again about game design and game dev. I have roughly around 260 to 270 hours in RPG Maker VX Ace. I have spent most of that time learning different tricks with it in regards of making a scene or making a particular piece of code work to where it is as I desired. I've also tried with Unity, Godot, and a few others in regards to designing things and essentially trying to learn how to make my own video games. Making video games and telling a story have always been huge passions of mine, and it stems from the fact that I've spent a good 13-ish years of my life in the tabletop RPG community. Like, I've spent so much time and money on Dungeons & Dragons, Shadowrun, Pathfinder, and so on. So, yeah, I've got a lot of pent-up imagination in this brain of mine, and, well, kind of going through that also led me to trying to make my own video games and so on. I've made my own card game, actually. I have not released it because I don't have any art for it. I'm not particularly good at drawing. This PNG you see of me is something that I drew, but as you can see, it is not the greatest. So, yeah. Hydrate. Always must hydrate. So, let's get on with this. So the first I wanted to talk about is with this pre-written section, because I normally do very off the cuff, it's come to my attention that it's better to actually write down what I wanted to say for each of these games that I played from the RPG community, because each one so far has been amazing in one way or another, or appears to be some sort of diamond in the rough, something that I see a lot of potential in. During this, you may hear me say things like RTP, plugins, or the like. Just know that these are common terms in the RPG Maker community, and the RTP essentially means the graphics or the sound or the coding that comes with the game. Most of the time it literally means the graphics themselves. A lot of games use what is known as the basic RTP, or the basic graphics and code that come with the engine when you first get it out of the box. So not a lot is adjusted or changed. It is very, very base bone RPG Maker. Now, RPG Maker games in general tend to get a bad rep because the system is literally so easy a child could use it. My son has used it a little bit. He's not really gotten a grasp for it, mostly because it's not really his thing. His thing is more of music. So I'm not really going to fault him for that. But at the same time, because there are so many people that are very easily able to pick it up and use it, you get a lot of low effort or poorly made games, as well as a lot of games that have exactly the same exact same plugins in regards to menus or something else across multiple games by different people, because those plugins are just that good. Almost every RPG Maker game out there made for MV or MZ, which are two of the newer releases of the RPG Maker engine, have the same crafting, battle system, turn order, and a few other things. I may essentially come across one or two of these as I go through these showcases, depending on how common they are, but this is what I wanted to talk about first. So the first one is actually the first game, or I'm sorry, the last game I played, Aether Chromatica. Aether Chromatica by Guy Gisufej. I probably should have asked him how to say his name. Uh, but it was the last one I played for the stream last time. But I wanted to talk about it first because of the aforementioned RTP and plugins. If you're looking for a standard RPG kind of game, this is it. While the graphics are basic and in regards to like they're the RTP that comes out of the box, I believe that the story is what helps define this game the most. I definitely consider this one a diamond in the rough. And apologies, trying to organize my words after a long day, so even though I wrote everything down, let's face it, you talk all day, you don't really want to talk anymore at the end of it. More water. That's what I need. More water. Hello, Greybard Gaming. We're just getting started. We're talking about the first game that I wanted to showcase or talk about. Greybard Gaming is also one of the developers for one of the other games that I will be talking about later down, called Biosynthetica. Welcome, welcome. But on to Aether Chromatica, which was, again, the last game that I played, but I want to talk about first because it uses a lot of those basic RTP graphics and plugins that we see across a lot of different RPG Maker games. When I say standard RPG Maker or standard RPG with this, I do mean it. I don't mean it as a bad thing, and I certainly do not feel like this game is bad at all. It's a diamond in the rough, and it could very easily turn into a very good game. It has potential. It's got good writing and essentially relatable characters, and I feel like given a little bit more, even though it's got a couple of edge cases, like, edgy character, it's done in good humor, and I feel like like I said, it has potential. So I'm really excited to see how far this demo goes and how far this one person makes with this idea that he has. So as far as other portions of this game has a lot of the same beats normal RPGs would when it comes to story or design. And again, in no form do I find that this is a bad thing. My initial thoughts on it was that there was a moment that felt like the character Carmine was exposition dumping, but after going back through and replaying that scene, I've changed my mind on that. The primary reason being that in the game design, there will be moments where exposition must be given. Who are you? What is going on? Why are you doing the things that you are doing? These are critical in a good RPG, but also very critical in any TTRPG or video game in general. The person playing has to understand and be invested in the reason why they are even bothering playing your game. Otherwise, they just won't be interested. Thank you for the follow, Greybard Gaming. So, Aether Chromatica is also an example of the most commonly seen plugins that I have mentioned before. I easily spotted a couple, such as Yadfly's turn order display and visual HP gauge. Now, I'm not saying that it's bad that the game uses these, far from it. These are good plugins, and honestly, they are made by very skilled individuals. It's kind of like the same with others by Yanfly, Hime, or Galv. They have some of the best plugins that you will find for RPG Maker games, or the RPG Maker engine. Sure, there's other developers out there, but they are the most common, and to be fair, they've got a lot of experience under their belt. There are some rough spots with the RTP, such as the scaling of characters compared to the scenery, as well as somewhat hilarious moment of realizing that the doors sometimes change to different doors depending on the scene. But like I said, I do not consider this a bad game because of the amount of potential I can see in it. The character Nikolai, or just Nick, has rather relatable personality and a view on situations. It's obvious he's not the brightest of the bunch, but he's willing to throw himself against it in order to pull the people he cares about through. At the moment, Aether Chromatica is a demo that runs for around 2 hours, but I highly suggest giving it a download and a go. The creator has mentioned that he's wanting to get back into it, but he's currently dealing with some personal matters, so unfortunately a lot of things are currently tabled until he's able to get through those. Best wishes go out to him. I hope he's able to get back to this because, again, I see potential and I want to see how it goes. The next one I wanted to talk about is actually the first one I played on stream for when I started doing these RPG Maker showcases and charity streams. Which, as always, yes, this is also a charity stream. Down below you should see a link for Extra Life Gaming, which goes to the Children's Miracle Network. Even if you only give $1, that dollar goes a long way and we greatly appreciate it. And again, I get nothing, so only use the Extra Life Gaming. That's it. Don't click on any other links. So, the next one is Sword of Saints by ABAC. Sword of Saints, it was the first one I played, and this game is what I would call the definition of a charming nostalgia trip. Now, I know I'm not old enough to remember that the very early days of RPGs on NES. I mean, I'm old, but I'm not that old. However, with this demo that I played being a visual upscale of the original version that they made using RPG Maker 95, I can certainly see how it is a love letter to the old days of the first couple of Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior games. The art and the music being the biggest sellers in that old school style, there were some custom sounds. Actually, no. All the sounds were custom made because I did actually talk to ABAC about this. He made it in a month for an RPG Maker 95 game jam. So the art, the music, the sound effects were all custom made for that original project, and this version that I played on stream was just merely a porting over and upscaling of a lot of the art where he had to redraw it. And I do mean almost everything had to be redone. With the culminating of all this together, you see something that stands out from the same style you see almost everywhere else, and I do mean almost everywhere else. The RTP, or the graphics that is used, is not like the most common or very basic RPG Maker games that you see out there. Almost every beginner hobbyist, when it comes to game dev, if they use this engine, will use the same graphics that Aether Chromatica showed, because those are what come with the box. But when you see someone who has painstakingly made their own graphics or their own designs, it makes it stand out. Even if it's not the flashiest of designs, it still stands out because it's different, and that's important. The combat in this game is very straightforward. While the story... apologies about that, a bit on my own tongue. I hate when I do that. Right, so the combat is straightforward, as is the story, while still keeping with that old school charm. Yep, that's right, Greybard. The good old NES and SNES games. Those were the days. I don't care what anyone says. A lot of the RPGs from back then, like Sword of Mana, or actually I think back then it was Secret of Mana, but in the old Final Fantasies, those will always have a permanent place in my heart. Not because of just the nostalgia, because of the simplicity of the game. Let your imagination take over for a lot of places that the game didn't fill in. And like I said, this game, this Sword of Saints, is that. It is a love letter to the original Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior, and even the first Breath of Fire games. Lufia and Chrono Trigger, definitely, I would label them with this as well. The game for this, or the creator of this game, is ABAC. He stated he plans on continuing not only finishing this upscaled version for RPG Maker MZ, but also improving upon it further and eventually releasing another version called Super Sword of Saints that will have even more improvements in regards to the mechanics and graphics. And it honestly makes me really think about how the graphics changed from the NES to the Super NES. Kind of that old Mario to Super Mario. I hate there's not too much I can actually say about this game because it's such a callback to the old school RPGs, but I can attest to its quality, I can attest to its sound, and I can attest to its design. So I'm certainly looking forward to the full release of the upscaled version and also the newer version of Super Sword of Saints when he's able to get to it. Now, he has said that he does have a full-time job, which a lot of game devs out there do, especially if they're doing this as a hobby, like myself, like Greybard Gaming, like when I asked him, as well as ABAC and others. This is a hobby, and since it's a hobby, it unfortunately takes backseat to full-time jobs, other projects that require our full attention, and so on. So while he might eventually, by the end of this year, get this version finished, the Super Sword of Saints, he unfortunately does not have a good time scale as to when that will or might happen. Either way, I look forward to it, and I feel like it is certainly something to look forward to. And again, that's Sword of Saints by ABAC. Gonna take a quick drink of water because talking too much. Yeah, like I said, talking all day and then coming to talk more. I'm not used to it, but I'll get there. The next one is actually the second game that I ever played on stream. And again, it's pretty popular. But I would like to point out, it's not really what I expected. So you see, the game was made using RPG Maker MV. And with MV released back in 2020 alongside MZ, this game, though, was different. And I say different because, one, it was an absolute delight to play. You see, it's got a good 40 minutes of solid gameplay, and it's all about puzzles. That's right, this isn't an RPG game, it's a point-and-click puzzle game with a bit of a horror aspect. So, The Faith of Sin is something you will actually see very often with RPG Maker games. It was made by Teddy Beer, a Korean, I believe. Well, let me rephrase that. The original game was made in Korean, and it does have some English goofs from translating from Korean to English, either with spacing or with just how certain sentences flow. That being said, it's still a very good and charming game, and I don't feel like any kind of translation or scaling issues for the differences between the languages actually negatively impacts the game. In fact, it kind of makes it a little bit more charming. But at the same time, as I said, The Faith of Sin is something that you actually see very often with RPG makers, in the sense of, instead of making RPGs, they're using the RPG Maker engine to make things from, puzzles, visual novels, some kind of horror game, or a mix of all three. In fact, some of the other ones that I've added to my list to play for charity streams and to do this showcase for, I want to say a good third of them were horror games, or are horror games with visual novel kind of aesthetics. I've actually seen a couple that were closer to action-adventure games, like the old Legend of Zelda. So, while The Faith of Sin has some minor rough spots, likely, again, due to the creator's use of English as a second language, these do not detract from the overall experience. The game's narrative follows a protagonist seeking to recover his lost memories, with fleeting recollections of past conversations and loved ones, imbued with a deep sense of regret and guilt. Though I won't spoil too much of the plot, I can confidently say it was an enjoyable experience. Again, it's about 40 minutes if you're good with puzzles. And if you're a puzzle of puzzle games with a dark and mysterious story, I highly suggest The Faith of Sin. Give it a try. I'm sure you won't regret it. However, be mindful that it does touch on some heavy themes. I also wanted to point out the art direction. As you see here, it's actual puzzles that pop out on the screen. This art is custom made. It's not actually anything you can get in any of the RPG bundles. Someone had to actually draw this and make this. And direction-wise, I feel like a lot of the graphics helps a lot. They're not overly flashy, they're good quality, they convey what's in front of you, and the puzzles even require you to notice small details to follow a thread of sorts. Heck, there was one that I did not see for the longest time, and I struggled with because I didn't realize that little window screen back there is actually interactable. Like, I literally wasted a good 5 minutes trying to find one piece of a puzzle that I couldn't find because I had to mess with the blinds. But, still, The Faith of Sin by Teddy Beer is a good 40-minute game, puzzles, and, best part, it's free. That's also another thing you might see with a lot of RPG Maker games. A number of them are free. And there is some, let's face it, some less than great games out there that are also free, and a lot of people, because of this, see free games as shovelware. This shouldn't be the case, honestly. There are some price ranges that you can charge for an indie game, and it feels like an indie game to where the gamers who buy it don't feel like they're getting ripped off. But most of the time, whenever they see a game that is under $2, they're going to think that it's low effort or it's shovelware and not really worth a lot of their time because it's only $2. And I can honestly say that's not always true. I've found some other games out there that were less than $2 that were absurd, silly, and goofy, and thoroughly enjoyed playing them because I played them the way they're meant to be played, either as like little co-op games where you smack each other around with fish, or other things like that. But Faith of Sin, while it might get overlooked because it's different, it also stands out a lot because it's different. And I feel like you guys should really give it a try. Ugh. Ugh. Alright. One more drink of water. Huh. You know, I'm really glad that I wrote so much because it allows me to talk just a little bit more and also get used to speaking more often. And also the fact that, hoo boy, I get to write and get all this out of my head because I have been really sitting on a lot of this stuff. Like, it's very infuriating. I've had other things that I've been wanting to write about, but instead of writing about them, I am writing about this. And not just, like, this next game, but, like, each of these games. I went back and played every single one of them, start to finish, to get this all out of my head, so I hope you guys really appreciate it. Because I have ADHD, and while Adderall does help, once I start hyperfixating on something, I really, really, really need to get it out of my head. So, the last game, which was actually the third game that I played for stream, is none other than Greybard Gaming's Biosynthetica. It's on Steam, it's on itch, but I found it while it was on Steam. And while it is still in the demo stages at this time, there is so much that I can say about this game. The graphics, the sounds, the events and combat system, almost every part of this game was obviously crafted with love to the point that you would be forgiven for thinking it wasn't an RPG Maker MV game. Honestly, the only thing that gave it away to me as an RPG Maker game was the movement of the character you control. That is it. I would not have noticed that this was made in RPG MV purely because of how well it was done if it wasn't for noticing how the little robot you control moves when you press the arrow keys. Because of it being very grid-based, that's it. That's the only way I was able to notice. As far as the game itself, the story in this game is good, and it's combined with the use of atmosphere and audio. It gives a great, oppressive, dystopian feel in the sense that things are at their worst, and it's up to you to try and get out and save the world, or at least avenge it. And I don't mean dystopian in the sense of evil corporate overlords, but more in the sense that the paranormal shit has hit the quite literal fan. And humanity is either wiped out or on the brink of extinction, and your little robot is made to help save them, or maybe avenge them. Oh, and that audio. I mentioned the audio, right? The audio is good. It is very well used in one particular scene where you can hear faint whispers from one or more unseen observers watching you. The sound of movement, the music that plays, all adds to the ambience. And even though you are moving away from the sources of those whispers, you could still faintly hear them, as well as others, as if there was others also with them, not speaking as loudly, trying to converse with each other quietly. There is a variety too with the different sounds, such as the little arcade machine that you use to upgrade your skills, having a great chiptune theme. I actually kind of danced to it a little bit. As well as the radio menu that's used also feels very nice, smooth, and at the same time very on brand for how the world should feel or look like if it was part of the HUD of your little robot. Speaking of the HUD, upgrades you bit my tongue in. Upgrades you unlock help change the HUD in ways that make sense and do not feel intrusive or out of place. And because it was something that was brought up to me, combat-wise, it's turn-based, meaning not very fast-paced, but certainly requiring planning and a bit of strategy. Some enemies, they like to stay up close and punch you in the face, while others prefer ranged attacks that fill up your corrosion meter. That meter, by the way, does damage over time to you when it gets filled one time, and it can be filled more than once, which can suck. So keep in mind your repair items and your status removal items, because they are key in this game. However, that is not the only resource you need to watch in combat. You also have a lovely balance, or have to balance, these two lovely resources, known as FDM, or Force Drive Module, and your energy cells, because, well, that's how you do a lot of your abilities. Energy cells are used during combat and do not recharge unless you use an item until after combat. And then the FDM, or Force Drive module, that you build up by attacking in melee allows you to use other abilities such as combo attacks or one with fire, lightning, and so on infused into it. Because of this, and how you have to balance your resources as well as which targets you attack based upon their own attacking patterns, I feel like the combat is very good. It's, again, not high paced, but it is certainly tactical, especially in the sense that you have to be mindful of your resources and how you use them, because when you run out, you're out. And let's not forget, some enemies are just annoying, and you have to pull them back closer to you, unless they keep backing away, in which case you might run out of cells and have to rely on your only proto blaster, which, good luck if that's the case. Boop, boop, boop. There we go. So, as you can see... Ooh. Oh, don't you give me those love eyes. I can't stand love. I'm not very good at it. Well, that's not true. There's one person. But I appreciate it. More water. So, as you can see, out of each of them, Biosynthetica is the most complex and developed of them so far. But at the same time, it has the most potential, and the creator is actively working on that game. The same could be said for Sword of Saints. I would like to point out, I wanted to cover these ones not only because they were the first 4 that I played, but also to show the difference in style and potential for each game. While Faith of Sin is considered completed and no further work needed, it does help show the potential of RPG Maker in making non-RPG games. It is a very versatile engine that is able to do other things, even though the thing that it's best at making is RPGs. Sure, the system needs a bit of tweaking depending on the style of gameplay you wish to show or have. The fact remains, it is a good engine, and it's great for beginner devs who wish to try their hand at making something. And just note that, well, some projects may seem simple, but overall, development speed, that highly depends on your skill with the engine. It also depends on how much effort you put into it and what skills that you have. Like myself, I'm primarily a writer. I have, again, 13 plus years in multiple TTRPGs. Again, Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, Shadowrun. I even got some early PDFs on a bunch of other different different tabletop RPGs that haven't really hit the shelves just yet because they're still in early Kickstarter or early versions, and I'm going through them because I enjoy game design. I'm not super great at it, but I enjoy it as a hobby enough to where I read about it and learn about it. So if I were to go back and try and work more on another RPG Maker project or another game design project, I would have to make sure that the overall amount of quality that I want in the game would require less, essentially, speeding through the things that I'm good at and more focus on the things that I'm not good at. I'm not good at drawing, as, you guys can tell by my PNG here. So, in addition with the speed highly depending on your skill with the engine, another thing to think about is, again, what you're trying to accomplish. The original Sword of Saints was made in RPG Maker 95. Took a month for a game jam, but the upscale version remade into MZ that I showed has become a year-long process due to having upscaled the graphics through redrawing and so on. There's also the factor of having other projects or work needed that can sometimes make you, well, essentially put what you want on the back burner. As I mentioned, a lot of game devs who do this as a hobby have full-time jobs. Sure, some of them might want to actually break in and do more, but when it comes down to it, the full-time job takes priority. It pays the bills. And sometimes there's other projects that you get pulled into because, well, it helps you get your foot more into the community to where people will be like, hey, I know that guy. He's good with doing this. Let's pull him in and see if he'll help us with our project. Things like that. Another example of this is Biosynthetica, which, while the playable demo apparently took about 8 months to make, but look at all that they accomplished. Custom art, plugins, and most of all, voice acting. Oh yeah, voice acting is a major thing a lot of indie devs tend to either gloss over or not include at all. However, even simple voice acting for key scenes or key individuals helps add an extra level of flair to your game. And adding flair in one way or another helps your game stand out and seem like it's worth that little extra time and money that you ask for in return. I've seen time and time again people getting RPG Maker and trying to make some 40-hour RPG, not realizing how much of an ambitious project that is. Not realizing that after 20 hours of work, you might have 20 minutes of playable content. There is so much that goes into game design, and not just with using RPG Maker, but any engine out there. Unity, Unreal, Godot, so on, or is it Godot? It doesn't matter. Even if you're using like RenPs or some sort of visual novel kind of system, what you make and how long it takes you to make something is not always going to equate to the actual playable content. Again, you might spend 20 hours making something, but only get about 20 minutes of actual playable gameplay. That's just kind of how it is. But yeah, that's pretty much what I've got in regards to the reviews as far as looking at the 4 different games that I've played and talking about them. So I do appreciate you guys hanging around for that portion. The rest of the portion I wanted to talk about is actual game dev itself. Because, well, like I said, it's not just about what the end product is, it's about what you did to get there. Game design takes a lot of work, and there's a lot of tools out there to help you. But it's not always, well, finding the right one is not always easy. Because it's like, oh, so I want to make a game. Well, cool. What do you want to make? There's so many different engines out there, it's sometimes hard to choose. There's no real best engine. It just really depends on what you're trying to do. I mean, heck, what was it, Undertale? Undertale became an internet phenomenon. It was unique. The definition of unique. It had great combat, story, puzzles. It had a lot of dad jokes, to be honest, and I really enjoyed it. Toby Fox was essentially just a programmer at the time that he originally made it, but does it matter? It's a great game. A lot of people enjoyed Undertale, and because of it, it spawned so many fan projects and so on. So you don't need to be an amazing programmer. You could just be a good programmer, or even an early one. There's also a lot of games that were made in very simple engines. What's a good example? Let's see. Undertale was made in Game Maker. I remember that one. Pizza Tower was also made in Game Maker, and that's a 2D platformer. Very strange game. I remember my kid playing it. Very strange. Kind of funny. Very strange. But, again, Game Maker is a great engine for making 2D games. It's not very great with 3D. So, when you're first developing a game, choose the style that you want. That is going to be one of your first steps. What kind of style do you want it to be? Is it 2D, 3D, 2.5? Because isometric is kind of making a comeback, and I do like me some isometric strategy games. So, first things first, what kind of style do you want? Next, it's going to be the concept, or essentially a bit of the elevator pitch of the game. I like to roll those two in a bit, because the elevator pitch, you got only a certain amount of time to essentially tell someone why you think your game is a great idea, why you think it's promising. At the same time, you have to get that concept in there. If you tell someone, hey, I got a great idea for a game, it does this, 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 but you don't really convey the concept of what's the objective of the game, what do you want your players to feel, what's the main thing they'll be doing, things like that. If that's not in that elevator pitch, don't bother giving an elevator pitch. God, I'm going to eventually need more water. The next thing you need to think about is audience. Not every game is for every person. Because, I'll be honest, I play a variety of video games. I like tower defense games. They're, like, quite literally an addiction for me at this point. It's a little concerning. Yeah, it's probably more than a little concerning, but it's concerning. But yeah, I like tower defense games. I play a whole bunch of them either on Roblox or on other websites, and that's just how I like it. Roblox is a great example of a lot of different ideas, and some of them are being shovelware, of game dev because you have such a wide variety of different topics or audiences that you're trying to hit, as well as different genres. So if your audience is primarily, kids, what kind of games do you think the kids would like? What genres would they like? Would they be willing to branch out to other genres if they are similar in a certain way? Is your game going to reference a lot of pop culture from your childhood, or is it going to reference more modern events, which you kind of have to be careful with, because if you reference things too often, you're kind of dating yourself, and that makes it very difficult for a large portion of your audience to relate to your game and find interest. And again, the genre is very important. Tower defense, first person shooter, more puzzles, platformer, RPG, tactics based. It really depends on what you're trying to do. So, again, 2D, 3D, 2.5, get the concept and the elevator pitch down, and then figure out if the genre you're wanting to do, if it would actually appeal to the audience you're wanting to hit. If you're wanting to get kids to play your game, I'm going to honestly tell you, it's probably going to be closer to first person shooter or something that doesn't require a lot of reaction time. They might like first person shooters, but they honestly probably won't have the reaction time, depending on their age, to where they're going to get frustrated with it and not play it very often. But if you give them something that is a little reaction based, but not heavily dependent so, or it's not as competitive against other people, they might gravitate toward more because of the sense of accomplishment due to certain tasks. But that again goes into the structure of the game itself and less about the genre. So the next after the genre, after you've chosen, so let's say tower defense, because again, I have a bit of a problem and an addiction to those. Don't judge me, I've been on addicting games for too long. So, what about the setting? Are we doing some medieval fantasy, real world, alternate reality, where people have squids coming out of their faces and crabs flying out their butt? I mean, I'd probably play that just to see what it's like, but, choosing the setting of the world and the world structure itself, that's very important to designing the game. Again, it goes in some with the game concept, but the world structure is more of developing further and refining. It's always about refining. You essentially put out a broad stroke and then you start putting in the smaller strokes in order to help give better detail and texture to the ideas that will become the video game that you're making. So, next is honestly player. I know a lot of people will immediately try and jump into multiplayer or some sort of MMO, and honestly, I have to say that is a terrible idea. Now, don't get me wrong, multiplayer is great. MMOs, depending, are great. Not World of Warcraft. Fuck World of Warcraft. Final Fantasy is really great. Fuck World of Warcraft. But when it comes to MMOs, you have to think about how massive those actually are. How much can you actually support, and will you actually get the attention that you want for the game that you are trying to push out to everybody? A good example would honestly be Helldivers 2. They are not an MMO, but they are certainly multiplayer. And because of the system that they had set up, they weren't expecting such a huge amount of players, and it caused a bit of a bad taste in everyone's mouth during those initial weeks, purely because no one could get on and play. And while that's not entirely the dev's fault, it certainly does fall on their shoulders as well, purely because, hey, they made the game. They're supposed to maintain it. They're supposed to make sure it's ready for a large number of players at any given moment. It just kind of got a little out of hand, and like I said, I don't really fully blame them for that. So the next part, after you decide if it's going to be single player, multiplayer, or massively multiplayer, I guess it would be the core loop. Essentially the very actions that you do as you play the game. First-person shooters have moving and shooting, running and jumping. Is it dialogue options, such as in a visual novel? Is it drawing cards, such as like Slay the Spire? Things like that. The core loop is that. The core actions that will become the very centerpiece and mechanics of the game. If you can figure that out in that initial drafting stage as to how you want the game to play, such as, again, Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire is a roguelike with a deck building aspect. You start out with some cards, you try and advance the levels and get more cards and artifacts in order to essentially conquer this spire. That's all it's about. That's the core loop. It's right there. You draw cards, you play cards, you kill monsters. Simple, easy. Alright. So, chums, you got all that written down as far as the first big broad stroke. There's just one little thing that you need to add into there after that initial broad stroke, and that is the look and feel. You see, when it comes to games, they're very graphic heavy. Sure, there's some old ones out there that aren't, that use ASCII, like, the old Ultima games, or, even the very heavy chat-based games that are kind of making a comeback. But still, at the same time, a lot of people are very visual oriented. So the graphics, the animations, the colors, all of this is very key when it comes to making a video game. And again, it does come back to the whole replayability. If the game is fun to look at, even if you've beaten it, you might still go back and play again, purely because, well, you like how the game looks or feels. And honestly, that stuff ages with the game. If the game's graphics aren't up to snuff, for whatever reason, when people find the game and it feels like they're looking at something that's dated or poorly done, they'll pass it over because they think, oh, it's shovelware. It's not something that's worth going into. So, again, look and feel. The graphics, animations, colors, and honestly the sounds can go into this as well. Because if none of those essentially combine into a good game, then it's going to weaken the overall project. Now, you could have a game that has good sound, good graphics, and crap story. I've seen plenty of those. That's pretty much every Activision Blizzard game ever made. So, yeah, like every Call of Duty. Just go ahead, throw it in the trash. Everyone only plays it for the running and gunning because the graphics are pretty and guns go boom. That's pretty much it. But that, again, is their core gameplay loop. If you wanted something more in-depth, then you most likely would look to other developers, because other developers are more about developing story and focusing on that. Dragon Age Origins, I feel like, has a very good story, but graphics-wise, it's a little dated, especially if you went back and played it now. Another good example of an older game that graphic-wise did not hold up, but story-wise was very good. Probably one of my favorite, which would be Final Fantasy VIII or Final Fantasy IX. A game that I feel like that didn't hold up very well, but at the same time helped define the RPG genre, would be Legend of Dragoon. I actually played that game recently, and I have a lot of words to say about that, but I'm not going to say it, because if I say it, I am going to go on another rant, so moving on. So, after getting that first initial broad stroke of the overview of what you're wanting this game to be, the next one is the actual gameplay itself, where you actually start designing the gameplay. So, things such as the objectives. What's the main objective of the story? What's the player trying to accomplish? Are they trying to find hidden pieces of some ancient puzzle in order to find the MacGuffin, or beating a secret boss that no one else knew about? Actually, that'd be a secondary objective, but I'm talking primarily about the main objective. What is the purpose, the story, the reason for the game? That is one of the first things you needed to define when you were thinking of the gameplay itself. The next one is also progression. And by this, I mean essentially, how does the player level up? How do they get better, or how do their skills influence the progression through the game? Do they simply get a new weapon? Because that is a form of progression. It's kind of how Doom used to be. You didn't get skill points, level points, or anything like that. And I'm talking about like the old Doom. You got a new gun, and that new gun did more damage. It's simple as that. Or it did damage in a wider spread. That is a form of progression, as well as difficulty is also a form of progression. How do you know that you're going the right way? Well, the monsters are getting tougher. That's why. Ooh, fresh water. Essentially, a lot of developers use a difficulty curve, which in some case is optional, but honestly, a difficulty curve is good if the setting of the game is best for it. There are some things that are not good for it, but when it comes to a difficulty curve, it's kind of generally expected because while even if it's a relaxing puzzle game, you expect the puzzles to eventually get harder, more complex, and essentially more challenging because you want that sense of completion and satisfaction of completing that game, of completing that puzzle. So I like to think that progression and difficulty curve go hand in hand, and they need to both essentially complement each other. They can't at any part fight against each other. You can't turn up the difficulty and then make all that difficulty worth nothing by giving them a new MacGuffin or weapon or something that just kind of trivializes it. You can do with some games, which they'll have like a monster be a boss for one level, but then 3 levels down make that boss a common enemy. That's perfectly fine if done right because it gives the player the idea or the feeling that they have progressed, that they have gotten stronger from the last time they fought that monster, and now they can fight it on a better standing. And also at the same time make them feel kind of badass because like, I used to struggle against one of you, but now I can like take on 5 of you at a time. That feeling is very important to game development because it's, again, not just about you developing the game, it's about what your players experience when they play your game. And very similar to not only the progression and the difficulty curve, God, it's also about how that core loop that we talked about, how that flows throughout the entire game. And again, from the player's perspective, if you are doing just one linear story, that's perfectly fine. But at the same time, adding in secondary, essentially, missions or side missions or areas, secrets, and so on, collectibles, things like that, those help add to that core loop while maintaining the flow of the beginning to the end. And that's, again, a finer detail of adding to it and defining that overall broad stroke. I guess one of the last things I would talk about is honestly, well, there's 2 last things I talk about. First one is mechanics. Essentially, when you're designing a game, developing it, there's one thing you need to think about. How do they play? What is the initial combat like? What is the rules? How they interact with the game, how they essentially do things. If you're going to have a crafting system and you have like a special item that they need in order to craft everything, establish that item. How do you establish the rules of that item, how it can be used, how it can't be used? You also have to make sure that when apologies, I'm blanking for a moment. This is what I get for like off the cuffing this portion versus the written portion that I did earlier. Oh, give me a moment. Oh, I remember. Okay, so yeah, a good example would be a project that I was trying to work on, and it's currently on the back burner, but I did implement a crafting system into the game to essentially try and best figure out how I wanted to do things. For an example of an item that helps establish the rules of the game, I introduced it early on. And I essentially had it stated that, oh yeah, this is blank. I believe I called it called ore. It's a special ore that is used for enchanting items. And what it is it's used in every magical crafting. So there's like crafting to make a special staff or a special weapon. There will be other ingredients needed in order to make those things, but called ore will always be needed because it is the main ingredient. So, by essentially establishing that early on, that this particular ore is what you need for crafting, players will know, hey, if I want to craft this cool sword or this cool armor, I need to go get this. I need to know where to find it or how I can best gather up as much as it as I want. Yeah, you'll have some players that like hoard it, but that's perfectly fine. Again, it's part how the players interact with the world and part how you have set the rules or the how the game universe itself works, essentially. This includes physics, economy, character movement, player interactions, which is not only with other NPCs, other players, if you decide to do multiplayer, but also menus like saving, the normal menus. Saving I bring up because like there's a lot of games where it's like, oh, you can save anywhere, or oh, you can only save at certain save points, and you have to decide early on, do you want save points or do you want save anywhere? Because those are two different systems, and you can have both, but it's good to stick with one or the other in order to have a consistency and also for the players to understand why they're doing it. Also, I'd like to point out, if you do save points, you also have the added question, do you make them lore? As in, do they become canonized in the lore? Does the save point actually just make a clone or a copy of you? Or does it, like, if you die, it just teleports you back to that? And you don't actually die, you just kind of like fall unconscious, where the crystal or whatever teleports you back, resurrects you, and Bob's your uncle. That's something that you have to think about. The last thing I could think of in regards to the mechanics... No, that's kind of it in regards to mechanics, because honestly, the graphics and audio, as I mentioned, it goes back to that original game settings and structure that I had mentioned. Because if you don't have a good look and feel of the game, which the look and feel is not only how it looks in regards to the camera of being, it's 2D, 2.5 or 3D, but also the animation style. Is it minimalistic? Is it realistic? Things like that. Will there be like open world? Will it be corridor based? Will it be scene based? All of that is all based in that look and feel. Graphics and audio are very big pieces of game design. They're not the only things in game design, because again, you can have a game that looks great, sounds great, but plays like crap, and the story is crap. But hey, at least it looks great and sounds great, and at that point, why don't you just make a movie? And then you have other games where the story is great, but the audio and visuals are terrible. And the gameplay mechanics, as far as like how you interface with the game, oh god, it's awful. And if that's the point where the story is the only saving grace of your game, because everything else is just utterly irredeemable, then write a book. It's simple as that. Finding that good balance between graphics that don't make you want to peel your eyes off, audio that doesn't make you want to stab yourself in your eardrums, a story that doesn't make you want to peel your own face off because it's terribly written, and mechanically playing in a game to where it doesn't feel like your hands are going to fall off of you and run away from you. That weird balance that you need to find is where I think you essentially find a good game. So, how about an example from more modern? Destiny and Destiny 2. I know I've, ragged on Activision Blizzard some here, but to be fair, they kind of deserve it. They really deserve it. And I'm not going to take no otherwise, because it's Activision Blizzard, fuck them. But what I will say is that when it comes to Destiny and Destiny 2, mechanic-wise, playing the game, especially in PvE or PvP, as far as how the game controls and feels when you're moving about, shooting, and so on, Destiny and Destiny 2 have great mechanics. They have that base bone of like, hey, we know the foundation that we're building this on. We know what we're doing. The story and narrative, kind of weak. Always has been. Wasn't really the point of the games. But I feel like they did try. But the story, it was kind of weak. However, it stood very strongly on its other three legs. It's kind of like a chair. You got three legs. Story, mechanics as far as getting into the game and interfacing the game, graphics, and audio. Destiny didn't have good story, but it had good three other legs. It had great mechanics, great visuals for graphics, and great sound. So, it still passed because it still had three good legs. Now, there are some other games out there that, again, have great story, but not very much else going on for it. If the graphics and the audio are passable, and the mechanics of the game are as well passable, to the point it's like, hey, I like playing this game. It's not the greatest game, but it's enjoyable, then it still can be considered a good game. Or, like I said earlier with Aether Chromatica, it's a diamond in the rough. It's not the best game out there, but it has a lot of potential. With more work, it could definitely get there. And I'll be honest, I am kind of a sucker for story and narrative when it comes to a lot of things. Because again, primarily writer, I wrote a lot for my own Dungeons and Dragons homebrewed world and a bunch of other stuff as well. So if the story narrative of your game, as far as like the main plot, how the plot progresses, key cutscenes that the characters are going to be interacting with, the characters themselves, if they are not very compelling, hell, even if the supporting characters are very droll, then it's going to be hard for someone like myself to be very interested in the game. I have played some games where the graphics were good, story or the audio was good, mechanics were very mid-range, but the story was terrible to the point that I never finished the game because honestly, I just couldn't do it. And honestly, unfortunately, The Legend of Dragoon is one of those games. And I said earlier that I didn't really want to go on a huge rant of it because, again, it's one of those RPGs that helped define RPGs, especially for the PS1 era. Legend of Dragoon did not age very well, like at all. So it's best just to say that it had good graphics for the time and audio for the time, but that's kind of about it. It didn't really stand very well on the other two legs, so it wasn't a very good chair. And I swear to God, the one thing that bothers me about that game the most, it has to be the main character, Dart. How the hell do you lose a jewel to a thief? A jewel that is supposed to be, like, the magic MacGuffin that gives you your powers. What are you doing just waving that thing around, huh? What the hell is wrong with you? What are you? Stupid? Did you eat paint chips as a kid? Seriously. Don't wave the magic jewel MacGuffin around. It gives you your powers. Keep it in your pocket or keister it or something. I don't know. Don't make it so easy to steal. Anyways, sorry about that. Gotta get some water. Yes, I have opinions about games. So, after going through all of that, another key thing is what are you going to be fighting? Enemies, if there are any enemies in your game. What's their connection to the plot? What is your character's connections to the plot? Again, I'm a sucker for story and narrative, but at the same time, these are very important, especially if you're making an RPG. And I know I'd said like RPG Maker is a very commonly used thing, but again, if you're going to be using an engine that's great at making RPGs, might as well make RPGs. I remember back in, I think it was last month, maybe the month before, but it was in the RPG Maker Reddit, not the Discord, but the Reddit, but someone was talking about how they didn't like one particular trope because they found that that trope was cheap, which honestly seems kind of silly. When it comes to writing, it's a trope. Tropes are very commonly used. I think at this point every trope has been used multiple times. It's just how you mix them up and use them and portray them. The whole point of a trope as well is to elicit a desired emotion, like all tropes do. Any kind of RPG, be it TTRPG or a video game or whatever, is primarily about the story. That's why it's called an RPG. So the only way a trope could be considered very cheap if it's kind of like shoehorned in and not something that's built up to or doesn't make sense or it's just out of the blue and does nothing more than to frustrate the player and nothing else. A trope is supposed to do something that helps further the plot or define the plot and make the plot more interesting. Case in point, their character is trying to kill an evil king, as it will allow him to complete his revenge, elope with the princess, save the world, yada yada yada. NPC 1 helps him through most of the adventure, hints at the idea of how things may get worse if the evil king died, but he still helps the player, he still helps the hero fight against the evil king's forces and eventually get to and confront the evil king. NPC then stops the player from killing the evil king. He gets in the way. Even though they fought together up to this point, he stops the player and tries to plead with him. Yes, the player is being betrayed by this NPC, but the NPC is more of like, hey, don't kill the evil king. I get your motivation, but don't do it. because it might make things worse, because without him leading, who's going to lead? Because you're planning to run off with the princess. So that's an example of a trope and using a trope. Oh, thank you. It's me, Matt Min. It's me, Matt Min. Thank you for the follow. That destroyed my train of thought. Nope. Wait. Nope. I got it back. So yeah. So finding a trope and defining what tropes you're going to use in your story, that is an important step in game development. Because again, if you're going to making a game that has any kind of story, let's face it, even the silent protagonist is a trope at this point. So you kind of have to start somewhere. Oh. So let me think. The only other thing I could think of is, well, honestly, probably the tutorials. How do you provide help to your players when they're first booting up your game? Do they come in and just have little pop-ups all over their screen like, oh, hey, you can do this action by pressing this? Which a lot of new games out there have it. Heck, even Space Marine 2, which, by the way, is super fun. It has pop-ups saying like, hey, press this key in order to perform this action, or do this in order to do that. And it essentially tracks you doing that in order for you to progress. That is a form of tutorial, while at the same time not being too invasive and stopping the flow of gameplay. Because again, it doesn't pause the game. It merely shows the buttons that it wants you to press, how to press them, and then tracks you doing it. And it's just essentially not going to let you proceed until you do the tutorial. But, again, it's not invasive in the sense that it stops the fun. It just merely says, hey, once you do this, we can move on. This is how you do it. All you got to do is like 3 or 4 times, you're great, you're golden, you move on. Thinking of how you introduce mechanics and interactions with your players through those tutorials, either through a tutorial level that showcases an ability that's going to be used either, well, I'm not going to say either, I'm going to say hopefully multiple times throughout your game, is important. And that's another thing about feature creep and so on. Please, please do not make it to where you get an ability and it's used only ever once. Because, and I will say this with all seriousness, if I get a MacGuffin for a temple, for a shrine, for a dungeon, or whatever, and it's only ever used in that dungeon and never again, that is bad game design. The reason being is that essentially it's just a one-use pony. It's a one-trick pony, and it's never referenced again. Instead, have it used to get through that dungeon, have it used to get through that puzzle or whatever, and then have it come back either here and there before the end, or have it come back at the end as well. Actually, no, just have it come back every now and then at the end as well, so that way it feels like the player is using all of the experience and things that they have gathered throughout their adventure, versus just, again, a one-trick pony that's never mentioned again. I feel like that is a mixture of the... Yep, I've got a number of them. I'm able to switch through. It's not perfect, but yeah. But yeah, tutorials and essentially feature creep with using abilities or MacGuffins of some kind. I feel like that is very important. If you're going to make an ability a key aspect for one particular puzzle or dungeon, it is best to make sure that it comes back again and again. As they say in comedy, 3 times is the charm, because comedy comes in threes. So I would do the same. Have the ability or that feature come and be used at least 3 times before the end of the game. And the same for tutorials. If you want them to make sure, or want to make sure that the player has essentially a good grasp as to what you're wanting them to do, don't have them just do an ability or something like that once. Have them do it 3 times, and then the next tutorial starts, or so on. Whew. Oh, man. That is a lot of talking. I think I've been streaming for an hour? Hour and 11 minutes. I'll cut 5 minutes off of that for the startup, but still. Oh. Now I'm out of water. Ugh. So yeah, I appreciate all of you stopping by and essentially listening to me rant for this time. Uh, for those of you who missed a bit, we started talking about 4 different games. I'll pull them up real quick. Again, this is about essentially Aether Chromatica, which was the last game that I played on stream, but the first game I talked about here. This was made by Giusefage. Giusefage. I again really should have asked him how to pronounce his name, so that way I could pronounce it properly. But it is an RPG Maker game, free on itch.io, and it is a very good 2-hour play that is very focused on the story, but it has good concept and ideas that I feel like if it got a better coat of paint, it could go further. The next one that I played or wanted to talk about, or rather I did talk about, was Sword of Saints, a love letter to the old NES days of Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior and Breath of Fire. With it being such a love letter to those older games, the graphics represent that as well as the story as being very barebone, but at the same time very well done because they were able to focus more on what made those games good versus trying to make it more than what it was. The next game I talked about was The Faith of Sin. Again, it is a puzzle-based game, about 40 minutes long, but with it being a puzzle-based game, it's a point-and-click kind of adventure versus the standard RPGs that you see in RPG Maker. And again, custom assets, just like Sword of Saints, so it has its own flair and its own unique look. And then the last one, and the most developed one that we talked about, Biosynthetica. This game at the moment has a Steam page, as I am currently waiting for it to actually fully be released. And once it does, I will probably play through the whole thing, either on stream or somewhere else. But I'll definitely play through the whole thing, as well as the other games, when they're fully released. Because, as all things, I see potential, and I like seeing potential in video games. The idea that things will get better, or have a possibility of telling an even grander story than what I originally saw. To me, that is a part of not only being a designer, but also as part of being a storyteller. I'm literally the guy that's playing TCG Store Simulator. Oh, TCG Store Simulator. Uh, oh boy. I don't know. I've done a number of store simulators, but at the same time, I totally get it. It's it's one of those games that I've also talked about, but I didn't talk about here. Oh no, I know TCG. I am an well, I'm not anymore, but I used to be an avid Magic the Gathering collector. So I stopped doing that because, whew, that costed way too much. What was I going to say? No, damn you, ADHD. Oh, right. So if you guys are thinking about essentially becoming hobbyists in doing either RPG Maker or other game dev stuff, there's a lot of available content out there in regards to where you can get started. And there are some other games like Trading Card Game Simulator where it's a lot less about the story. It's more about the interactions. There is one that I did play for a brief moment, but I didn't really talk about it here, called Dominate and Conquer. It is a time waster game. And I don't mean that in a bad sense. I'd like to point out, I don't think it's a bad game. It's all about essentially doing one particular thing or one strategy until you get all the way to the end, and then it's over. There's nothing further. It's just that. And it's all about essentially using up your time to pass the time. That's it. That's all it's about. There's no grand story, no great complex mechanics, nothing. It's just a very charming little game. Let me see if I can pull it up actually real quick. Dominate and Conquer. It was made by Tobiyasha. Let's see if I can find... Where is my OBS? There it is, my OBS. this is it. So, as you can see here, it's a little game. And this is it. This is all it's about. Essentially, placing units to kill the other units, to kill the king, and that's it. You go through all these different battles. They have different little maps, different things on the map. Get to the end, and that's it. That's all it's about. Getting to the end, and there's no ending screen. There's nothing like that, because it's not what the game is about. The game is about essentially wasting a bit of time. There's not really even a save function in the game either, because it's not about that. And honestly, for the $8 that I spent to purchase it, it does its job very well, because I quite certainly do waste time with it every now and then. I'll pop onto it while I am on break or on lunch and just play a couple of rounds and then go on back to work. How long does it usually take to finish? If I've got a good strategy going, 30 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes. Excuse me. Hope I muted in time. But as far as each of the games, yeah, hope I didn't cough in your guys' ear. As far as each of the games, as I mentioned before, Aether Chromatica, you're looking at a good 2 hours to play. It's got kind of a long story, but again, it's 2 hours of gameplay. Sword of Saints, I want to say, is about an hour, maybe hour and a half, depending on the route that you take. And then Faith of Sin is about a good 40 minutes of puzzles. And Biosynthetica, it has a lot of replayability to where you can just like keep playing even after finishing the demo story. But I want to say I got through the demo in... Actually, I don't know why I'm saying I think. I could actually go look. Because unlike the other ones, that one is actually on Steam. About an hour and a half. Nope, here it is. 2 hours. I've put about 2.2 in it, but I want to say about 2 hours of it was actually to the story itself and essentially trying to get through initially. Right now on my streaming, I'm focused on Bendy and the Dark Revival, but after that I can look into Biosynthetica. I would highly suggest it. Each of these games I feel like deserve attention as equally as the others. However, I will be honest in the sense when it comes to the quality, Biosynthetica is the one that stands above these at this time, purely again because of the guy's experience and how much he has put into it. So, I would highly suggest giving it a go. As far as Bendy and the Dark Revival, I did think about playing that game for stream as well. It is kind of a weird spot for me because I did play a little bit of the original Bendy of the Ink Machine, and I both kind of like and don't like the whole let's start over kind of thing. And, well, it doesn't just feel the same, if you get my drift. I feel like something has definitely changed very much with Bendy, but I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to say. I'm also not very great at horror games. I am a bitch. That's pretty much kind of what it boils down to. I have never actually even finished any of the Five Nights at Freddy's because I will hit escape and close out the game, which I think is the best feature, that I could just mash escape and close out the game. And I'm not saying you should do that with your game. I'm just saying it's great for horror games because I will definitely hit that after I've screamed. You've played the game and also, bitch. Yeah, no, it's like, I hate jump scares. I hate jump scares the most. Because, first off, it's like, fuck you for jump scaring me. But also, it's a simple fact of, it's like the fart joke of horror. I like ambience. I like atmosphere. Things being built up. But then you just pop out and make me, let out a little fart or a little poo. That's not fair. I've got all this tension wound up in me from a legitimate scare, not a jump scare because you decided to, knock something over out of the corner of my vision and give me a little spook. Oh, all right. So, as far as you guys wanting to pick up an engine, some of the best ones out there again are things like GameMaker, Unity, Unreal, Godot, and honestly, if you're wanting to make a visual novel, Ren'Py is one of the biggest ones out there. Little Nightmares is also a good game. I'm waiting on the third one. I did see about the second one. I never played the second one. I did play the first one. I really enjoyed it. Uh, but I think when it came down to it, the biggest thing was, I think what it was is that I enjoyed it and I felt like, yeah, this doesn't need a sequel. And then when eventually a sequel came out, I was like, but it didn't really need a sequel. I'll give it a try eventually. And then I never gave it a try, which is on me. That's on me. Not even going to sugarcoat it. That's an oopsie daisy on me. Oh, that's also what I wanted to say. Don't fret about how long it's going to take you to make a video game. Because again, I have, I think, one playable demo or concept out there for a RPG game. And again, I've got like 260 something hours in RPG Maker VXAs. And that's all I got to show for it. Yeah. So there are some people where if they looked at my time in Maker at all, they would just laugh and be like, "Oh, you've barely even scratched it," which is probably true compared to some people out there. Some people probably have anywhere like a few thousand hours in it, and that's perfectly fine, perfectly acceptable, because again, it's what they are developing and essentially devoting a large portion of their time to. So focus on that. If you're going to make an RPG, or actually if you're going to make any kind of game, keep in mind the amount of time that is going to be needed, how much time you can actually devote to this project. And the grander the scale of the game that you wish to make, the bigger the time it is going to require. No one is going to be able to make a grand piece of, hours long content in a week if they want essentially the quality of that game to be good. It's also a major problem that's been going on in the mainstream AAA development scene when it comes to designing video games. Crunch is a thing, unfortunately. And I get it. They have, things that they want to hit in regards to market numbers and as far as getting things out in time for Christmas, things like that. They want to say, hey, we got to here by this date. That is going to happen. It's as simple as that. But it's also come so bad that we are having good game development studios. Arcane Austin being an example. They are known for making good single player games. But the industries has changed because, well, who bought them? Yeah. Go look at who bought Arcane Studios and Arcane Austin and look at what happened. It's shit. That's what happened. Arcane, for 24 years, I believe, it might have been 25, but they made games like Prey, Dishonored. Do you know how amazing Dishonored was? And Dishonored 2? All because of Redfall. Yeah. Well, it's not purely because of Redfall, but rather they were made to make Redfall when that is not what they worked on. That's not what they did. They made single player story driven games. Again, Prey, Prey 2, Dishonored. These were very heavy story based games that used interesting mechanics in order to get things done. But they were made to make Redfall. And that is just a game that was not within their skills. And not to mention, it was a live service game, which I absolutely hate live service games. I hate live service games. They are terrible ideas. Yes, I like some MMOs, but those are slightly different, but at the same time not. When it comes down to it, live service games are a bad idea, purely because of how much it takes to run those things. Let's also not forget that a lot of live service games are about short, non-satisfactory, core loops that are about trying to keep you on there as much as possible because they want to point you towards an item shop or microtransactions as much as possible. They are more about those microtransactions than anything else, and part of the reason why I don't fully consider them the same as MMOs. Yes, I have my problems with World of Warcraft because I have my problems with Activision Blizzard, but at the same time, minimizing the amount of trying to push people to essentially a an item shop or some sort of microtransaction in the game itself, that is the difference between an MMO and a live action or a live service. Games, when they become massively multiplayer or online multiplayer or anything like that, become games as a service, which that's just kind of how the industry is, and part of the reason why indie developers are getting better and getting more spotlight today, which is also, again, part of the reason why I'm doing this. I'm not doing this just because I want to hear the sound of my own voice. I've actually got it to where I'm muted and I can't hear myself, which is great because I hate the sound of my own voice. But if the video game industry continues on the way it's going, mainstream AAA game development is vastly different than what it should be. And the indie scene is kind of where it is, where hobbyists who are, again, making games because they have a passion for the project that they're working on. And yeah, that's where things are going to best go moving forward. To where, let's face it, no one wants to play the newest Elder Scrolls because it's going to suck. It's just going to suck. Because they're not spending as much money or time on writing. They're spending more money on looks or finding ways of cutting corners. Heck, I don't know how many games out there that I've seen that have already started cutting corners with writing by using AI ChatGPT to write the story. Having OBS and SteelSeries has definitely helped me with my streaming. Oh, definitely. And I did think about purchasing better stuff for streaming. But yeah. Dang it, squirrel brain. What was I saying? Squirrel, right. Live service games are essentially one of the big things in the industry at the moment. And because a lot of investors have poured their money into these large industries, it's becoming the point where they push out games that are half-baked, or sometimes not even half-baked. They're like a quarter-baked, and they're a complete mess because they were like, hey, I want more money, and I invested money into your studio. And honestly, that's just how investing works. So, when it comes to game development in the future, it's the indie scene that I feel like is going to be the key to keeping the passion alive, as well as keeping gaming alive. Because, yes, there are a lot of great indie developed games like Stardew Valley out there. Stardew Valley, even though it came out quite some time ago, still has a thriving, and I do mean thriving, mod scene to where people are constantly trying to make new things for the game and essentially expand upon it versus just leaving it alone. It was indie developers that made Stardew Valley. It was indie developers that made Slay the Spire. It was indie developers that made FTL, Faster Than Light. It was indie developers that made Dwarf Fortress. These are all games that were and still are played to this very day. Yes, there's other games out there that were made by other studios that essentially got a lot of hype and then eventually were bought out by larger studios or development companies. That happens. But it's the indie scene where things start and where things and trends start moving. So if we want essentially less microtransactions and more games that are dedicated to having a good story, to having a good look and feel to the game, to good mechanics, and essentially games that are made with a passion versus with a wallet, the indie scene is where it's at. If you want to find a good game that's going to keep you entertained for hours and you feel like you got your money's worth, at the moment, indie is where it's at. Because you can go into Steam and you can find a bunch of re-releases of older games, or, essentially pixel updates of NES games or PS1 games. Like Final Fantasy. I love Final Fantasy. It's one of my favorite series of video games. But, that being said, I will not deny the fact that Square has absolutely screwed the pooch when it comes to these pixel remasters. I hate them. I don't like them. I don't like how they also made the game super easy for all of the ones that they did their pixel remaster, to where it's less of the game than it was, and it feels like I'm just playing with a Game Genie on, which feels kind of like cheating. Like, I get it. Some games are too difficult for people. I'm not going to knock them and say, hey, get good. You shouldn't play the game if you're not good at it. I mean, hell, there were times I'm not great at games. There's a time that I was bad at RPGs. But I learned, and I got better. And at the same time, there's still games today that I still absolutely suck at, like rhythm games. I hate rhythm games. I like DDR, but I am terrible at them. DDR is like a cardio workout, but it will kill you. It almost killed me. But still, focusing on that aspect of making games for a community and finding that community and nurturing them, that is what the indie scene needs to do, and what the indie scene has been doing, because the larger developers aren't doing it. I mean, heck, what are the two big flops that came out recently? Dustborn, and what was the other one? Concord. That's it. They were bad. Like, they were really bad. Like, I don't really have any other way of putting them. Concord and Dustborn were just bad. Like, there's no redemption whatsoever. Bad. But at the same time, I could see potential, and I can see that some of them were actually... Some of the characters were really made with love. And it's not just the concept of the game that it's bad. Because, honestly, if you told me, hey, I got a single-player game for you to try, it's story-driven, action-adventure, it's about robots punching, racists in the face, I mean, like, okay, you kind of got me interested. I'm willing to give it a try. But then you essentially make the characters insufferably annoying, then I'm not going to enjoy the game. It's as simple as that. If the characters that I am playing or interacting with or seeing the most on the screen are insufferable or poor renditions of something, then I'm not going to really vibe with the game, and then I'm just going to uninstall and ask for my money back. That's kind of what happened with Dustborn, and it also goes into other media as well, because, let's face it, no one liked Velma. Yeah, I'm talking about the Scooby-Doo Velma knockoff show. It wasn't really Scooby-Doo because Warner Brothers didn't want to give them the actual Scooby-Doo, which is, thank God, because I really hated that show, Velma. It was a piss representation, almost a mockery of everything, versus actually being about what it tried saying it was about. It's like, oh hey, I feel politically or religiously about this particular way, so I would like it represented in a respectful, even if it is parody, I would like to be respected in that, or represented in that way, versus what we got, which was, hey, I am this particular gender, demographic, whatever, and I will be loud, obnoxious, and overbearing until you respect me. Which is, by the way, stupid. Don't ever do that. Respect is earned, trust is earned, everything is earned. And honestly, if you want a demographic to be positive with what representation you are giving them, make sure that the representation is actual representation and not just useless pandering. Because that's what happens with a lot of newer games, as well as media out there in general. They're pandering versus actually trying to provide good representation. Ugh. yeah, my voice is dying on me. I have been streaming for hour 37 ish. Well, -5 for the startup time, so about an hour 32. With that being said, I need some good water and, well, probably a few other things. But either way, I appreciate all of you. I appreciate you stopping by and listening to me rant about these games again. Give them a try. That's Aether Chromatica, Sword of Saints, Faith of Sin, Faith of Sin, and finally, Biosynthetica. Each of these games can be found either on itch or on Steam. I believe Biosynthetica is the only one that can be found on Steam, but the rest can also be found on itch, and they are worth the freemium price. That's right, all of these are currently free. Again, give them a download, give them a play, give them a chance. Feel the slightly corny, but at the same time, good writing of Aether Chromatica. Feel the nostalgia trip of going back to the NES days with Sword of Saints. Rack your mind with a few puzzles as you try and unravel the mystery of the character's past and what he feels guilt and regret about in the Faith of Sin. Try and survive and possibly help save or avenge humanity in Biosynthetica. I'll be finding other games to play as well as to review. My plan is to essentially to find 4 more games, play through them, or at least an hour each to see what that initial hour feels like and base some of my initial thoughts off of before going back and playing more. And from there, doing this again, where I talk about the different games, what I feel like they did well or what they could do better, and essentially bring them to your attention again. Buckshot Roulette could be a good strategy game. I feel like it is a mixture between strategy and luck after playing a little bit of it. I definitely see the appeal of it. It's definitely got that nice, good core gameplay loop of like, well, what's more, one more round, you know? Which I don't think you should ever say if you're playing any kind of roulette. Never say what's one more round because it's gonna be bad. But in a time of video games, yeah, Buckshot Roulette is a good core gameplay loop, and I feel like it's one of those games that you could definitely go back and play and waste a bit of time. It was one of the top games, and I love it. I think Trisha would be mad with the game. Oh, you're that Matt. I thought it looked familiar. Yes. Yes, Trisha absolutely would be mad with that game. I don't think she would do very well with it. I think some of the games that actually I showed on here, I don't think she would do very well with. Any kind of game that requires luck or extensive puzzle planning. I love Trisha very much, but yeah. I don't think she'd do great with them. I thought you looked familiar, Matt. I just wasn't sure. At some point, I will aggravate you about your streaming setup. But yes, for now, I need water, maybe some ibuprofen, and to rest and relax my voice. Everyone, I appreciate you greatly. I hope all of you have a wonderful evening, and thank you again for joining me. Until next time, which, if everything goes right, I will either be streaming tomorrow or Friday. It'll be one or the other. Oh, please do, only if you're ever on, you know. I'll poke you in a bit. Alrighty, everyone. Laters.